All right, so this is where we were the last time, and today one of a few things that I want to do is my job for today is to talk about triads and um, chord analysis, which is going to take us through the next few places that we want to go to. In just understanding just the basic theory, what they make us all do when we're studying music is to analyze other people's music. This is typically done so that we can steal their work. That's called plagiarism, and that's perfectly fine in music, by the way. Um, if you don't agree, that's okay. But I will tell you that there's example after example after example in music history where that was successful. So uh, I don't know where you are on the subject, but that's one of the reasons why it's done. This is the music that's Western music, and the way that it's actually composed still belongs to what we all kind of refer to uh, well, as modern music, as a common practice period. And so there are a few things that we kind of consider that might be rules about the common practice period. And one of them, is chord progressions. And when we do that, then we kind of study the relationship between one chord and another. So what it just means is that if somebody's actually trying to write a piece of music and they're going, I'm developing this whole thing and I want to have a sense of returning back home, then by studying some of these rules, then you can actually apply that to the music that you're writing. And musicians, when they see that, they can take the meaning from that and actually apply it to their interpretation of it. So it's just a very, very basic way of communicating. So that's a long way of telling you that what we're going to do today is going to be called triads. Uh, this is definitely going to take us down a rabbit hole. So uh, if you are of if we're going way too fast for you, I would rather you slow me down because everything that we're going to do from now on that's built on triads is going to build on itself. And so I'd rather go a little bit slower now so that we can go faster later, rather than have to kind of come back later and do a bunch of stuff because we kind of skipped it. Okay. So one of the first things that I kind of want to do, not kind of, I know that one of the things that I want to do first is to go through one more time to the name of the degrees to of the diatonic scale. Um, we didn't actually give them names before. We actually numbered them. So we went, degrees of the scale: one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Regardless of whatever scale it is that you're playing in Western tonality, we usually divide them into seven of them: one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, and then it returns to the tonic, which we would call the eighth in this case, or an octave. They do have their little names, and this is what they are. So there is tonic for the first, supertonic for the second, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, leading, and I'll show you a way to actually look at those because regardless of whether you're in a major or minor scale, this is only telling you in a diatonic scale, meaning that if we divide the octave into 7 degrees in between, uh, relative to the tonic, each one of those intervals is going to have a common name, and that's important because a lot of times when we're trying to communicate with each other, we'll say things like the dominant and whatever, and you kind of have to know that that's the fifth. Whether you're in a major or minor key, it doesn't matter. So that's really always going to be relative to the tonic of the scale. So let me see something here. Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. There's a circle of fifths. All right, so what I want to do with this, let me clear this out a bit. Whoops, you can't see that, can you? Haha. Let me share my screen.
implicates that that's possible.
Sehr gut. Whoever was speaking in German, that was pretty good German.
It was a video.
Huh?
It was a video.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Didn't realize I was unmuted.
All right. All right, so I'm gonna take all of this kind of stuff and just oops. Oh dang. So let's remind ourselves of the circle of fifth. Let me see if I can just kind of whoops. Oh, why is it doing this? I tell you what. You know, somebody told me that Mercury in retrograde applies to electronics. Is that true? I see yeses and nos. You know what? I'm going to start with a basic. All right, so the hell with that. I had a nice little clock template there, and my circle is not going to be so nice as that one. But let's go ahead and do this with me if you can. Take a blank sheet of paper, or you can do this on staff paper, but you're just going to have to write over it. But let's do this together so we can kind of check each other's work. So take a sheet of paper and then just kind of write a circle, or as best a circle as you possibly can. In my case, that's an egg. And you can just kind of make a clock out of it. So you have the 12 o'clock and the 6 o'clock positions and the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock positions. And then you have 2 in between each one of them. And there's at least a clock there. Okay, we good? All right, so let's go ahead and just do the easy stuff first. And let's just kind of say, we're doing this in order for us to actually figure out major, minor keys and how many sharps and how many flats are in each. And so it's good to start on the 12 o'clock position. It's good to start on C. You can start on anything you want, but the pitches are relative to this. So we might as well start on the high noon position. Call that C, because in a C major scale there are no sharps and no flats. So we'll call that C, and make sure that you capitalize it. So that's C, no sharps and no flats. Now, in this particular circle, you can do it a number of ways. You can call it the circle of fifths, or you can call it the circle of fourths, depending on how it is that you go about this. In this exercise, we're going to call it a circle of fifths, because when we go down, we'll go down a fifth, and when we go up, we'll go up a fifth. So this is +5, and this is -5. Okay? So that means that starting on C, if I'm going to go +5, I go, C would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So C, D, E, F, G. So G would be the fifth one. Trust me, that's a G. Right? And so if I count down from C in the C major scale, make sure that whenever you're doing this counting, that you stay in that scale. So C has no sharps and no flats. So if I go down 5 degrees from C, it's C, B, A, G, F. And that gives me that. And therefore, if I'm going minus, then that means that the key of F will have 1 flat. And if I'm going plus, then that means that the key of G will have 1 sharp. All right? So in order to remind ourselves what that order looks like, you can look at it, you can look at it this way. B, E, A, D, G, C, F. Going that way are flats. Going this way are sharps. So if I have one flat, which flat is it? It's B flat. So that means that in the key of F major, I have one flat, which one? B flat. In the key of G major, I have one sharp, which one is it? F sharp. Does that make sense? This is just a review, so I know I'm going kind of fast, but you should probably remember this because this is a good tool to have, and you should probably have it with you, you know, if you're thinking about chord analysis and all of that kind of stuff, because it's really, really cool tool to have next to you when you're analyzing stuff.
Hey, Robert.
Yeah.
It's Thomas here. Yeah, just got something that you might interject, and that's how this is derived to the point that you're already at. And that's if you take any note on the piano or any instrument, and you start with the correct order in the major keys, the correct order of whole steps and half steps, and then once you finish with the scale that you're trying to build, like in this case the majors, the sharps and the flats that you're building here with the circle of fifths are what worked out with that correct series of whole step, half step, or whatever you're doing. So, you know, some people might be interested in like, well, okay, I see this, but how did I get to this point in the first place?
Yeah, we when we built major and minor scales, that was already designed into it. But you reminded me, thank you for that comment, because you reminded me of something that you can actually do at the keyboard. Let me see, where am I? Sorry, once again. Share. There we are. So if I'm at the keyboard here and we know if my key signature is C, like you know that, right? So home base is here, right? So if I put my thumb here and I drape my fingers on the white notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's G. If I put my pinky on the C and I drape my fingers of my right hand on the notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's my thumb, F. You see? So the G will be going up, the F will be coming down. So that's why it's called a circle of fifths. And so then that means that if I build a scale on G, on whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, the same thing that we had before, will be whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And that builds the scale there. So that's a quick review on the major scale. Once again, you can do this at your keyboard, it's really a good thing to have keyboards or guitars, a visual instrument in front of you, so you can actually visualize all of these things. It's pretty convenient to actually do it that way. All right, so I'm going to go back to the circle of fifths, and let's go ahead and just kind of finish it out. A bunch of you guys probably already did it, but let's go through this. All right, that's on the way. All right, so if I go, if I start on F and I stay within the key signature, that means that F has one flat. Which one is it? B flat. So I need to go down 5 degrees from the F, and if you do your counting, then that should be A, B flat, staying within the key signature. Okay? And if you go down from that 5, then that should be E flat. Now, at this point, I will tell you that there's a trick that I didn't share with you the last time, but it's a pretty good trick whenever you're trying to fill this out really, really quickly. If you skip a degree from the clock, if you go down a whole step, it's a B flat. And if I go down a whole step from that, it's an A flat. And if I go down a whole step from the A flat, that gives me a G flat if I can write it. It's not letting me. So I'm gonna have to, yeah, there it is. That's funny, I just couldn't see it. I'm gonna have to change the, yeah. Whoops. I don't really know. Why is it doing this? Oh, I know why. I know why it's doing that. I think. Aha. All right, so here I am at the A flat. If I go down a whole step from the A flat, it gives me a G flat. Okay? So now to fill out the missing gaps, then I go back to the E flat and I go down a whole step from an E flat. What do I have? A D flat. You see? And if I go down one whole step from a D flat, what do I have? A C flat. And then that finishes out my flats. And so then that means that if I'm looking at this whole system, on my flat side, the F major has one flat. Which ones? B and E. B flat has two flats, B, E, and A. E flat has three flats. I'm sorry, E flat has four flats, B, E, A, and D, and so on. And that finishes out, so one flat, two flats, three flats, 4, 5, 6, and 7 flats. And it makes sense then the C flat would have 7 flats, meaning that everything is flat. And it makes sense because C natural has no flats and no sharps. Okay? So now let's look at the other side of the, let's look at the other side. So I'll try to do the same thing with this one. Now, rather than going down, skipping one degree and going up a whole step, or sorry, rather than going down a whole step, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip this degree and go up a whole step. So G plus a whole step is A plus a whole step is B, which happens to be the same enharmonic note as C flat, and that's how I can check. All right, so that if I go up a whole step from B, gives me a C sharp, which is the enharmonic note of D flat. So I know that that's correct when I get them both right, like that. So then what I can do to get the missing ones is that I'll go a whole step from the C, gives me a D, a whole step from the D gives me an E, and a whole step from the E gives me an F. I'll have to scroll down again. I'll just have to change the zoom out just a little bit. I'll do that in a second, so I don't have to keep doing this. F sharp, and look at that. F sharp is the same enharmonic note as G flat, and that's how I can do this. That's how I know I can check my work here. Okay, so now that finishes out all my major scales. So that means that if I have to figure out, let's say that I have a piece of, let's say that I have a score of music in front of me and I have to figure out what key it's in, and it has 5 flats, then I can just count and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know that it'll be down here on the D flat side. Which flats are they? B, A, D, B, E, A, D, and G. And so when I'm looking at a score and I'm seeing 5 flats, I'm going, if this is in a major key, it's in D flat. Okay, so that's one way to get at it. All right. Now, what we have to do then is that now we have to do the same thing, but we have to do the same thing with the relative minors, because not everything that we play is in a major scale. And so the two most common scales that we have, most common tonalities that we have, are going to be major and minor. So the relative minor to C, meaning that by the way that we build minor scales, and this is a review. A minor, and this is a time to use small case letters, signifying that they're going to be minor. Okay, But for the top three numbers, let's do the same thing for the top three numbers that we did, or for these bottom three numbers, same thing that we did for the outside numbers here. And so going down 5 from A minor, which has no sharps and no flats, staying within that same key signature, count down 5 degrees. So it's A, G, F, E, D. And that means that D minor, D pure minor would then have one flat. Which one is it? B flat. It's just your tonality is a little bit different. So your home bass is D rather than your home bass being F. Okay? So then let's take the A and go up 5 steps from A. And remembering that no sharps and no flats. So A minor, so A, B, C, D, E. So E minor is a relative minor to G major. It has one sharp. Which one is it? F sharp. And then by having these 3 already done, then it gives us how to fill out the rest of the chart. Because we do the same thing. We just skip one and go up a major second. So up a whole step from A is what? B. Up a whole step from B is what? C sharp. Whoops. Sorry. Duh. No, that's not right. Oh, I went to, I know what I did. That's why, man, this is really cumbersome here. Draw, eraser, pen. Boy, it's not the same thing as taking a pencil here. All right, so C sharp is over here. And so if I go up from C sharp, if I go up a whole step from C sharp, that's a D sharp. Okay? So now to finish out the rest of the blanks, then I go back over here. What's a whole step up from E? F sharp. A whole step up from F sharp is what? G sharp. And a whole step up from G sharp is what? A sharp. So F sharp minor is relative to A major. So that means that if my home bass is F sharp, if my tonality is F sharp, and I have three sharps, then I'm in F sharp minor. Which ones are they? F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Those are my sharps. Then let's do the same thing on the other side. Remember that this side actually goes down. So if I take an A and I go down a whole step from A, it renders a G. If I go down a whole step from G, renders an F. Down a whole step from F is an E flat. And check my work here. E flat is an enharmonic with D sharp. Same note. Okay? And then I can go back and finish out these guys. Down a whole step from D is what? C. Down a whole step from C is what? B flat. B flat is enharmonic with A sharp. So I'm good there. A whole step down from B flat is what? A flat, which is enharmonic with G sharp. And that finishes out my circle of fifths with my major and minor keys. So naturally, you're gonna do this a lot quicker than I am, because of course I was sounding it out, you know, with all of this. So you can do this just in a few seconds. But it's really, really good to have this when we're looking at chord analysis, because it'll give you the tonality, it'll give you the relative minors, and so you can have it as brain dumping right there, so you don't have to really think about it. It's kind of like, oh yeah, we're done here. Okay, so that's one thing to look at. Let me look at the staff paper here. All right. The other thing that I was talking about was, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just call this a bass clef. Okay, and let's pick a key right now. Let's just kind of say that we're gonna pick G. All right, so that's a G in bass clef. So if I'm gonna have, let's say that I'm gonna have a G major scale, How many sharps in G major? If you go back and you look at your circle of fifths, it tells me that I have one sharp. Which one is it? It's F sharp. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just put that as a key signature up here. And then it's easy for me to actually form a scale because then I can just put 8 degrees here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops, that's not very nice. 5, 6, 7, and 8. This note down here, this is a tonic, as in gin and tonic. Although you can't really drink it very well. All right. This note, the second degree, is actually a super tonic. And in this case, it's called super tonic because it's the note above the tonic. That makes sense. This one, the third one, is called a mediant. Mediant. So it's kind of like a half an ant. It's actually called that because it's halfway between here. It's just a third. It's up a third. So mediant. This one, the fourth degree, is actually called subdominant. And it's called subdominant because the fifth is called dominant. And the fifth is called a dominant because in a major key, the tonic gives you home, and the one note that actually makes home stronger is the dominant. That's the fifth. And that means that many of our songs in Western tonality actually end up with a 5-1 ending to it. We call that a cadence, and it's very, very commonly used. You hear that in timpani all the time, pum pum, pum pum, you know, like that. It's all over the place. So we call that dominant. So because the fourth degree is below that, then it's called a subdominant. This one is the sixth degree, and we call that the submediant. Submediant. And it's called that because it's a third below the tonic. So the tonic is here again. Remember that this is a G, and that's our home base. So we have tonic and tonic. Now the only one that we have to worry about here is this guy. In a major key, we always call this a leading tone. The problem with this note is that it's not always really called that because it's only called a leading tone if there's a half step between these two. In some keys, as in some of the minor keys, like in pure minor, that's not the case. In that case, that interval, or its function in a dominant scale, its function serves as subtonic. So that note, the seventh degree in a dominant scale, can vary its name depending on its function, on how it's relative to home base. I'll show you an example where that's a little bit better, because in some minor scales, some types of minor scales, especially when you're dealing with the fifth chord, which would be the dominant, what happens with the dominant in a minor scale, in a pure minor, is that you would have a flat 7 or a flat 7. In order to increase the strength of that note, a lot of composers raise that note to make it a major chord. You'll see all of that in a minute. And then the resulting sound, then it's a harmonic minor. And we'll look at that also. But for now, when these degrees are actually referred this way when it's a degree of a diatonic scale relative to the tonic. Okay, so that means that's relative to home base, whether you have a major or a minor scale. These are the names that a lot of us will refer to. The one that you'll hear the most is going to be the dominant, because dominant. That always is going to mean the fifth. Okay, in whatever scale it is that you're in. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, because then we're going to go back to bless you. Okay, so those are our diatonic tones. By the way, the term diatonic is there to contrast or contrast it with the chromatic. So diatonic just means that we split the scale into really 7 degrees, these 7 degrees. And chromatic just means that everything is a half step. So there's no order between half steps and whole steps. Everything is a half step, and that's what we call chromatic. And so this is important too, because, like, for instance, if you like an auto harp, or let's say a harmonica, for instance. Have you ever seen Stevie Wonder play a harmonica? He plays a harmonica that has a lever to it, and that's a chromatic harmonica that allows the player to play all 12 chromatic tones. A regular harmonica is tuned to a particular key, and so those are diatonic harmonicas. That means that they're already built in with a whole half mechanism, or in other words, the reeds that are inside the harmonica are tuned to those already. So you can't really change it. You can't play anything. You can't play Wagner on a regular harmonica. There. So Die Valkyrie, you're not going to be able to play that on a harmonica. Not very well. Not unless you have a chromatic harmonica. All right. So now let's look at what are called triads, which are living beings, like doodads. All right, so when we're doing music analysis, and we're looking at polyphony, we're looking at the way that chords sound, or that notes actually stack on top of each other. The simplest and most common way to actually stack these notes is to form what are called triads. And let me show you on a piano keyboard, because this is actually the best way to approach this. So there's my C. So if I drape my fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my thumb, and I go 1, that's a very, very common sound. We hear that sound all the time, all the time. So at 1, 3, 5. What do you want to hear on top of that? You want to hear that. It's kind of like doing the. Right? So you always want to hear that as your home base when you're talking about this. And what gets you there, if I do this, it's kind of like I win. You know, it's this really reassuring me that this is home. Okay. Oh crap! I didn't show the keyboard. Ah. All right, I'm not going to do that whole thing again, but thank you for the. By the way, if I don't respond immediately to the chat, it's because I can't. There are sometimes that I can't see it. So here it is again. I'm going to drape my fingers to my thumb. There it is. So if I go 1, 3, 5, that's what it looks like. So you see that's a really cool thing, because it kind of shows you shade, shade, shade. It kind of shows you the 1, 3, 5 there. Okay. And there's such a thing. Dominant and leading tone triads, but yeah, especially in a major key. But you'll see later when we get into minors, that's kind of different with a flat 7 in it. All right, so that's my, and we call it a triad because it has 3 notes stacked on top of each other. So this is what that actually looks like, and it's pretty cool because you can kind of see it. You see why it is that they do it this way. You know, Western music is actually pretty cool because they kind of figured out all of this stuff. Let me just kind of erase all of this business here. All right. So, and let's go ahead and just, you bass clef people, you're gonna hate me now. Whoops, trust me, that's a treble clef. It ain't pretty. It ain't pretty. But let's just kind of say that my key signature now is C, just to keep it consistent with what I did on the keyboard. So the first note that I played was a C, and if I actually build it on 1, 3, and 5, the third degree would be an E, and the fifth degree would be a G. So I would spell that C, E, G, and that is my triad built on the first degree of the scale. If I go up the scale and I do the same thing with each one of the degrees, you'll find that I will go space, 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 line, 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 space, 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 line, 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 and then we go back to the tonic over here. So you'll find that the spelling of these differs a little bit. So this is C, E, G, and we always build them from the bottom up. That's why the bottom note is called a bass note, because we build it on that as a bass. So for every one of these triads, we're gonna give it a name according to what the bottom note is. All right, and the bottom note is always going to be the bass of that particular chord. Don't forget though that we're in this key signature right now, which is C major. And so I'm putting the key signature over here with a colon. Now I don't have to put the M in there. I can just kind of put C like that, and it'll be evident by what I'm about to say after all of that. But whenever you're doing analysis and whenever you're analyzing music, it's always good to put the key signature down at the bottom to remind yourself this is where I'm at. This is kind of like my home base. And so each one of these are built chords. So the spelling of this bottom one is C, E, G. The spelling of this one built on D is D, F, A. That's how I spell that. And I spell this one E, G, B. And I spell this one F, A, C. And this one G, B, D. So it's kind of important to make sure that in your mind you're kind of going, okay, it's a triad on A, that means A, C, E. And this one is a triad on B, that means B, D, F. And this one is a triad on C, C, E, G. So it's always important to actually name them. Name them, okay? Let's go back to the keyboard and see what this business sounds like.
Question for you, Robert.
Yeah.
Why is the DFA chord in lowercase?
Oh, no, it's just because I'm being an idiot. It doesn't have to be.
Got it.
There's no significance to it in this case. There is later when we actually do analysis, there will be, when we use the Roman numerals, there's a big difference between the capitalized Roman numerals and not. But thank you for clearing that up, because I'll bet you may not be the only one with that with that question either. Okay. All right. So what was that? Oh yeah, I was gonna look. Let's look at the keyboard here. And so if you have your little MIDI keyboard handy, use this. I have trouble. In rethinking this class, I don't know if you can see this, but this is what I have, which is a tiny little MIDI keyboard, and it's kind of I wish that I had one on a stand. It would be a lot easier for me. But anyway, so here we are. I'm going to start down here in this octave, because that way my hand can cover it. So this is a tonic, and this is C. C. That's how I spell that. C, C, E, G, right? So let's spell these out with me, and actually, let me see if I can see this. Can I see? There. Now you can kind of see the names of the notes. So C, E, G. Right? Now I'm gonna build a triad on D. Call them out D, F, A. But listen to the way that sounds different, right? That has a different sound than that, and it's not just because of the tonic of the chord, but it has a different sound. This is a major triad, and what the resulting triad here is a minor one. So just for an example, if I was going to make a major triad on D, I would have to raise a third, and this is what it would sound like. So you, whoops, yeah. So you hear the difference between that and. So in C major, if I build a triad built on D, it's a D minor triad because of that third right there. All right, so I'm going to keep going. So I have C, right? Then D, then E. Then look at what happens to this one. Ah, that sounds different. That's a major triad right there. And look at what happens to this one. That's another major triad right there. Then this one. Back to that minor sounding thing. And this is the idiot one. Because of that stupid little note right there. Look at what happens there. So this is the seventh, and this is one of the reasons why it's called a leading tone, because it wants to go from here to that note. So you have this. Finish it, throw it. Ah. You see? So to me, this is like my dog saying, throw the damn ball. Throw it. Ah, everybody's cool. Back home. All right, so let's see what it actually looks like on paper. All right, so I'm gonna take my eraser. I'm probably not gonna erase all of this, but I want to erase some noise because this is it's just really busy. Actually, what the hell? All right, I'm gonna say in Treble Clef just because we started this whole business there. Damn, you okay?
Yep.
So you can do this with me on your staff paper, because this is what's actually going to tell us how it is that we're going to analyze these chords. When we use chord analysis, when we're doing this and we're analyzing a piece of music, we'll use Roman numerals to determine the quality of the triads. And what I mean by quality, when I say quality, you know, when it talks to chords, is whether they're major, minor, augmented, or diminished. And we talked about those intervals the last time. And so, if you remember what I was doing with the keyboard, there were some, in a major key, there were some of these triads that rendered a major triad. And we capitalized those. And they were, if you're doing a major scale the way that you should end up with a major triad with the 1, with the 4, and with the 5. And then we go back to the tonic being 1. And so those are our capital in a major key. then those are our capital Roman numerals. And so if I'm analyzing this piece of music, which would sound awful, if I'm analyzing this, then these are the triads that would render major triads. The second one, because I have a minor third here, because I have a whole step followed by a half step here, that is a minor triad. And so I put the small Roman numerals. And if you can kind of analyze this one here on the third one, the distance between the bass note and the third is the same distance. I have a whole step. Oh, I'm sorry. I have in this case I have a half step and then a whole step, but the distance is still a minor third, and so this is still getting that. So it's a whole step and a half distance between the bottom and the second note. And so if you look at the distance between the A and the C, it's the same thing as a whole step and a half. That means a minor third. That means that this is going to be pretty much another minor triad here. Like that. The problem is this one, because not only do I have a minor triad here, or a minor third between these two, but then I have a tritone at the top. And that's why that sounds so funky. So for this one, which is the seventh, it actually renders a diminished triad. So capital letters are major. Small Roman numerals are minor. A circle or a degree following whatever number it is tells you that it's a diminished chord. One that's not in here because it doesn't play a part in a major scale is a little plus sign. So if I had something like this, that would mean that that's an augmented chord. That would mean that I took the fifth of that chord and raised it. But we don't have any of those represented in a major key. So we're missing that one. We'll get to that later when we do, you know, more analysis. But those are really the ways that we actually tell the quality of a triad. We can have a major triad, or a minor triad, or a diminished, or an augmented triad. The difference between a major and a minor triad is always going to be in the third. In other words, the fifth, you're always going to have a perfect fifth between the bottom note and the fifth. Is always going to be a perfect fifth going up, until we get to that seventh degree in a major scale. And that's why that makes it a diminished. Because in the key of B, so if you look at the seventh degree, it starts on a B. If you go back to look in your circle of fifths, B should have how many sharps? Should have 5 sharps, right? Isn't F sharp one of them? Yes, it is. So look at that. It's not an F sharp, it's an F natural. So in this case, you have a diminished fifth, and that makes that sound, that makes that tritone between the bass note and the F natural. Okay. So let's look at what happens with a minor scale, because you'll have the same kind of rule. You're still going to have major and minor triads there. So let me just kind of change over here, and I'm going to change clefs just because we have, you know, this is about, you know, diversity here, right? So let's switch clefs here. That ain't pretty, but let's just kind of say we'll keep it with no sharps and no flats. And so let's start our minor scale on A. So this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so then we're going to do the same thing with this, and we're just going to go space, 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 line, 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 space, 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 line, 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 space, 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 line, 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 space, 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 line, line, line. Okay? So now look at what we're doing. If I'm gonna take the keyboard once more and see what these actually sound like. But the big difference is really gonna be that home bass is A. I still have no sharps and no flats. Okay. All right, so let's look at at what happens with the keyboard. And so now my home bass is, and so my scale so that sounds different, right, than a major scale. So we already know the big hint is that we're in a minor scale, so that very first interval, that very first triad with a 1, 3, 5, we already know that that's going to be minor. But because it's relative to its relative major, look at what happens to the second degree. There's that one with that tritone. So the second degree in a pure minor scale is always going to be, if you build a triad on that, it's going to be a diminished chord. So that would be a 2 with a little circle right by it. And look at what happens to the third. So the third degree in a pure minor scale is a major chord. The third, a triad built on the third degree of a pure minor scale is a major chord. All right, and then I go up one, another minor one, go up one, another minor one, then I go up one. But look at that. That's the 7th, right? I'm sorry, that's the 6th. The 6th degree of it. No, that's the 7th. Yeah, the 6th degree of it is a major scale, major triad, and so is the 7th. And I ran out of fingers here, but let me see if I can. Where's my octave key here? Let me see. Yeah. So if this is the 6th degree is an F, F8. There's a 7th. There's my other major triad, and back to the tonic, which is a minor. So in a pure minor, scale, then let's actually build this. So you would have the 1. The 1 is minor. This is the funny one, which has the little tritone on top, right? But now we have what? Can we spell this one out? It's C, E, G, right? This is the same as a major triad. In C major, this would have been the tonic, which would have been a capital letter. So our 3 gets capitalized here. Okay, and then our 4, the distance between the bass note and the third is still a minor third, so that gets a minor. And the distance between in the 5th degree, then the distance between this note, the E, and the G natural is still a minor third, so the 5th one gets a little Roman numeral. But now we get a major third between the F and the A, FAC, which is the way that we would actually spell that. So now we have FAC, we know that that's a major triad, so we give it a capital number. And the same thing happens then with GBD. GBD. And so that gives me a major triad. And then we already know that this was a minor because we're in A minor. Okay? All right, now that's kind of groovy. If all of the music that you ever hear is built on triads that sound like this. So, let me see. That's kind of boring. It's kind of boring because everything that you would do would just look like 135, 135, 135, 135, 135. And if you're a pianist, it would be really, really dull because you're playing everything that sounds exactly the same. But I will tell you that you can take a C chord. Let's look back at the keyboard. Stop. And I know that I'm C-centric today, but what the hell. So let's take a C chord again. So we have 1, 3, 5. All right. Now, how do I spell that? I spell that C, E, G. So what would happen if I take the G and I put it down here? But I spell the chord the same way with a C, E, G. So there's my G. I already took care of that. What notes am I missing? I'm missing the C, and I'm missing the E. That's still a C major triad. C, E, but my G is down here instead of up here. So I have C, E. Does that sound the same as this? Yeah, pretty much. It's just the distance, it's just that I put the G up here in one and down here in the other. So it's still the same chord. I just put that note down here instead of up here. So what I did is that I inverted the chord. And that's what these are called. These are called inversions. And because we're talking about each one of these triads can be inverted twice, meaning that we call it an inversion depending on what note of that particular triad, of that particular triad spelling happens at the bottom. And so let's go back to this guy. All of this can go away. So I want to go back to treble-ish clef. And so there's my C. There's my C chord, right? But what I did there is that I'm still, the spelling of a C triad is C, E, G. So long as I have the three notes, so long as I have these three exact notes, that's always going to be a triad. Whether I have it placed like that, or E, G, C, or G, C, E. They're the same three notes. It just depends on which one I want to put at the bottom. So I can put the C at the bottom, or I could put the E at the bottom, or I could put the G at the bottom. But they're the same three notes. In other words, I would spell this C, E, G. And I would spell this E, G, C. And I would spell this G, C, E. But they're the same three notes. And so when you're looking at something like this that stacks like that in a music score, then you kind of have to say, okay, how could I best arrange these notes? Just so that I understand what triad I'm dealing with. How can I arrange these notes on a line, space basis? And that is your biggest hint, because once you actually rearrange these notes, so if you're looking at this chord, if you're looking at this on a music score, and you see that GCE, how can I arrange this so that they all come out in a neat, tidy little group of, you know, line, 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 or space, space, space. That, by the way, is what's called a closed chord or a tight chord. This is, you know, that, and we call this in root position. So we would call this a C triad in root position, meaning that the C is the tonic of that triad. Does it have to be a C major? No. If I do a D minor triad, like and I spell it like that, this is a D minor triad in root position. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a major triad, it can be any triad. So long as you can spell it out like that, space, 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 or line, 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 in a tight grouping like this, then that's in root position. What's not in root position for that triad would be if I put it here. So the spelling is the same, I still have a D, but I don't have the D down here, I have the D up here. So the one on the base is actually the third one. So look at what happens. What's the distance? All right, well, this is the first degree, this is my third, and this is my fifth. So when I do chord analysis, if I want to analyze this chord and make it very clear to everybody that I'm talking about a D chord in a C major key, and I want it in root position, then I will call this a 2 like that, and I will put a 5 and a 3 right next to it. Signifying, you see where the 3 is? See where the 5 is? What this is painting a picture of what that triad is, and we call this figured bass, by the way. Now, you know what's funny is that 5-3 you hardly ever get to see it in analysis because that's kind of like the default position for any triad. So most of us don't even bother writing it down. When you actually start seeing this is when you start seeing the distance between that note at the bottom and this note at the top. So if I count the distance between this one and this one, it's 3, right? But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a 6 there. And the way that you would actually see that written would be this way. We don't really write the 3 because the 3, again, is a default. So we don't usually write the 5 and 3 here because it's default. So it's kind of like, why write it? But whenever you see in analysis, whenever you see something like this, then that means that it's a D chord in the key of C in first inversion. So the inversions here, this is first inversion and this is second inversion. So we can invert them. In other words, we can spell them. We can take the bass note and we can put the bass note in 2 different places when we are talking about a triad. It gets more complicated later, but we better get this down right. So with a triad, you're really talking about 3 notes. And that means that you can put the bass note in 3 different places. If the bass note spells out the chord by line, 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 you know that you're in root position. Or space, space, space. But it's tight like that. So that's root position. So you don't have to do anything. When you analyze it, you just put a 1 underneath it. Whenever you see the bass note not spelling out the root of the chord, you know that if you're dealing with a triad, you know that you're either going to be in first inversion or second inversion. And what you have to determine then is going to be the distance between the bass note and the fifth. I'm sorry, and the tonic. What's the distance between the bass note and the tonic in this case? And so you'll see that the distance between the bass note here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so For this one, in the key of C, let me erase all of this because it's getting really, really nasty. Getting very confusing. Okay, that's much cleaner. All right, so let's just kind of go, I'm going to go back to staying with the C's in here. And I'm just going to do this one here. And then, all right, so the way that I would actually say this in the key of C would be, this is 1, and nothing next to it, because my default is for it to stack up like that, 1, 3, 5, just like that. If I see this in chord analysis, then I would still say, okay, it's a C chord because it's spelled C, E, G. So I still have the C, E, G. So it's spelled the same way. But the distance between the note at the base and the note on top is really a 6. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That means that this chord is in first inversion. So I put a 6 right there. Again, I don't have to put the 3 here because the 3 is the default position for the second note. That's why I don't put the 5, 3 in here, because that's the default position. But look at what happens in this one. This is a second inversion of the same chord. It's still spelled C, E, G. So I have to still say that within the diatonic scale is the first, it's a triad built on the first degree of the diatonic scale. And it's a major triad, spelled C, E, G. But to signify that it's in second inversion, then I need to count the distance between the intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4 down here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when I do this, then it gives me 3 possibilities. It gives me the possibility of a 1 chord, or 1 in first inversion, or a 1 in second inversion. So on your own, just for the sake of argument right now, go ahead and take your staff paper, and let's just say that in the key of C, build a chord on the 6th degree in 3 inversions. So in root position, first inversion, and second inversion, starting on the 6th degree of the C major scale. Go. So the first thing that we have to do is that we have to determine what the 6th degree of the C major scale is. So if you just kind of walk it up, C, D, E, F, G, A. So A is the 6th degree. So I know that I'm going to be starting to spell a triad on the pitch A. So to be able to get my triad spelling, then if I'm going to put that A on that space, then I'll go space, 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 and that'll give me the spelling of the triad. The spelling of the triad should be A, C, E. And that would be that triad in root position. First inversion means that I would start on the 3rd degree. That means that I would start on that note, but the spelling would be the same, A, C, E. So I look for the next one in line, which would be an E, but then I have to put the A up here. And to signify then that this is the 6th degree of the scale, which is a minor triad in root position, that first one. This one is in first inversion. So I would put a 6 next to it like that. So in the second inversion, then all I have to do is just start it with this note at the base, that one, but make sure that I still spell ACE. What's my next note? There's an A and there's a C. And so to be able to analyze that, then I would do this and put 6/4. So this is kind of like the cool thing, because you can go through the circle of fifths, and you can do this with pretty much everything. Just triad. And if you have a keyboard, then it makes things a lot more fun, because you can get to, oh, this is the way that this sounds, and actually getting that sound in your head between major, minor, and diminished triads. It's really, really cool. So it's a big opportunity that we have to be able to do this. All right, let's see. See what else I have down here. All right, so we can have triads in root position and inversions. Remembering that the 5/3, you'll see it in some exercises that you might be able to find. You'll see the 5/3 and you'll see the 6/3, but really anything that has a 3 next to it, when we're doing this kind of stuff, is really just kind of the default. So it's not really necessary for you to actually put the 5/3 or the 3 with the 6. Just the 6 means first inversion, and the 6/4 means second inversion. All right, so we did that. All right, so now in addition to those, now all of these notes, when they're stacked like that, line, space, when they stack up in a triad within a measure or within close proximity to each other, those are mostly stacked up as harmonic notes. In other words, if you're seeing a measure that has CEG, your major triad, and you see nothing but CEGs in that whole measure, then your analysis of that measure would be C major, I'm done. Easy. Next. The problem with that is that if you see something that has C major in it, but then you see something else that doesn't belong to that chord, it's kind of hard to be able to explain it. It's kind of like, how the hell did that happen? So we have ways to be able to identify non-chord tones. The first one is a passing tone, which is what you can have between two chord tones. And we call it a passing tone because it's just between, in this case I'm looking at a C major chord here because I have a C, I have an E, and I have a G. And I can explain those three in a C major chord, but I can't really explain that F in a C major chord. The only explanation that I can find for that note is that it's just passing through. And it only lasts for a little bit. You know? So we actually call that note a passing tone. Whether it's going up or down, it doesn't really matter. But it's actually making its way between two degrees of that triad. You see it here. You see that this is a D, F, A. So it's a D minor triad. So this is in the key of C. This would be on the second degree. So your numbers here. For this scale here, this would be 1 in root position because I would spell that C, E, G. So you can see the C is here, the E is there, and the G. So it's in root position. So I have C, E, G. But that's the note that stands out of place. That note is out of place. And so I have to account for it somehow, and the way that we account for it is just let's call it a passing tone. In this case, my analysis of this one would be this in the key of C. So if I want to determine that this is C, then I would do that. Then it's if I were going to spell that chord, it would be D, F, A. So now I have to look for notes that don't belong there. The F belongs there, the A belongs there, and the D belong there. This one is the one that doesn't. So this is kind of like the Sesame Street thing saying, you know, three of these things belong together. So it's kind of like that. Right? So you just kind of have to find the one that doesn't fit, and that G doesn't fit. And so we call it a passing tone because it's actually going between two notes of that triad. Okay? And that's called a passing tone. All right. But wait, there's more. Of all things, and I think that I might have misspelled this, appoggiaturas have two P's. Appoggiaturas. And what an appoggiatura is, it's a skip of two non-chord notes that get you to the chord note. So in here you can actually see most of the time appoggiaturas are actually written kind of like grace notes. And so they kind of skip, and so they're not scale-wise patterns. They're actually typically a wide skip, and then you usually get to the chord note. They are actually appoggiaturas, and there's another one that's not on here. I'll think of its name in a minute, but they're throwbacks to the Baroque period. At some point after the Baroque period, people they wanted to actually write down what Baroque ornamentation was like. And an attempt, in Baroque music, it was up to the players to actually ornament the music depending on what they felt. And a lot of these ornamentations were really, really hard to write down. And so they would write down, you know, little figures and stuff like that to make them a little bit more to see if they could make folks attempt organize these ornaments, and they couldn't. So a lot of times they just kind of ended up with what are called grace notes, and so this is, even though it might be written like this, in performance it's actually played this way. And this is written this way in a piece of music, but in performance it's actually performed this way. In this case, I'm not really looking at the rhythmic quality of it. I'm just looking at the distance between the notes and where it is that the chord notes would actually be. In this case, we're looking at a C. Neither a B or a D actually fit that pattern. And so because there's that wide gap in between them, it resolves to the C. Then we call that an appoggiatura. I know that there was something in the comments, but for some reason I can't see the chat, so if it's important, chime in. All right, so then another one that we can do is that we can call them neighbors, as in howdy neighbor. Here you can kind of see an example of somebody that put a 3 in there that was unnecessary, but let's see if they were right. This was somebody actually analyzing this. So let's just, before we get to the neighbor, let's analyze this chord right here. So they're telling me that it's a tonic. There is the tonic in C, and look at that with a C in the bottom. So there's a C at the bottom. So how do I spell that? I spell that chord C-E-G. Is that a C and it's at the bottom? Yes, it is. So it checks that box. Is that a C? Does it belong in the chord? Yep. Is that an E? Does it belong in the chord? Yep. Is that a G? Does it belong in the chord? Yep. All right, so it ticks all my boxes. It's a C-E-G chord with a C at the bottom. That's a tonic, and it's in root position. Forget that note for a minute, and let's look at this one. It's telling me that in the key of C, that this is a tonic, first inversion. So for that to happen, then the third of the chord should be in the bass. That means that an E should be at the bass. Is that what's happening here? Yep, it sure is. But I still spell the chord the same way, C-E-G, right? So if the E belong in that chord? Yep. Does the C belong in that chord? Yep. Does the G belong in that chord? Yep. So yes, it's a tonic chord, But the E is at the bottom, which is a third, which is a first inversion. Did they spell it out right? Yep, they did. All right, so now what I have to look for in that measure is that I have to look at a note that doesn't belong to that chord, and obviously it's the A. Because the A doesn't belong in that. You spell that chord C-E-G, you don't spell it C-A-G. So we have to account for that somehow. Because it's right next to, and it resolves down to a chord note, then we call this an upper neighbor. But that can happen if you go below it too, as it happens here. We call this a lower neighbor. In both of those cases, those are neighbor notes. But if you want to be really specific about them, you can kind of say, well, is it a neighbor going up? Is it the neighbor going down? Or is it the Joneses? The third one is optional. You don't have to do that, but you have to keep up with them. All right. Sorry, I'm a band director. What can I tell you? Everything's cheese to me, you know? All right, so that's how we account for non-chord notes in this case. Now we have other things that actually tell us what's going to happen here. So we have a chord here with what's called an anticipation, and that's kind of like the Heinz ketchup song. But anticipation means that we're telling the public before we actually change to the next chord. We're telling the public where it is that we're going. And so in this case, if you look at the C chord, you can see that this is a tonic in root position. So we have C, E, G here. And of course we have the C repeated, but so I still would put this as a 1 Roman numeral, but that B doesn't belong there. But that B belongs to this chord, which if we're going to spell that out, that's G, that's D, that's B, and that's B. So they're really talking, in this key signature, they're talking about a 5 chord in root position because the G is at the bottom, G, B, D. That's the spelling of that chord, G, B, D, right? So the way that I would actually analyze that one would be to disregard that B in the first measure because it doesn't belong. So I would do this. If I'm going to call this in C major, then I would do that. And it's in root position, okay? And then I would go to this one, disregard the B because it's confusing right now. So I would actually go to this one and I call it, how do I spell it? GBD. Is it in root position? Yes, it is. So in the key of C, then I would call that a 5 chord in root position. So I don't have to write a number or anything like that with it. But I still have to account for that note. And the way that I would account for that note is to blame it on the fact that the composer wanted to anticipate, couldn't wait to get to that note. Couldn't wait to get there. So that note, which turns out to be the third of the 5 chord in here, then that anticipates where it is. That tells the public, I'm going this way. So you're just kind of telegraphing your intent there. That's what it's called, an anticipation. Okay? All right. So then the next one is, if we have anticipations, then we have people who are taking too long to get there. And those are called suspensions. And that means that non-chordal notes that stay too long, in other words, that belong to the preceding chord and don't resolve to the new chord, those are called suspensions. So if you look at what's happening here, you can kind of see again that this is a C chord in root position. So we have C down there, C, G, C, and in this case you're missing the third, but that's all right. It's still in there. So we just have the first and the fifth. But then what happens? Look at that tie. You see that tie? That means that whoever was playing that G took too long to resolve it. They didn't go to the new chord. Why? Because in the new chord, in the fourth, a major 4 chord in the key of C does not have a G in it. If I were going to spell a 4 chord in the key of C, that would be F-A-C. It doesn't have a G in it. So that G needs to be accounted for. Why? Because I can account for the F. I can't account for that G. So the first thing to look at that one is, okay, well, that person playing that G line right there was lazy. They took too long to resolve it to the F, and that means that is a suspension. Because they were bad and they misbehaved at school, so they're suspended. Okay, so that's another way to look at it. In this case, the way that we would actually call this would be relative to the key that I'm sorry, to the bass note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. So this would be a 9, 8 suspension. All right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Duh. It's right on top of it. All right. So this is not super important, but this is how you see this term right here, and you see this term right here. The 4/3 suspensions are really common. So the way that they actually analyze that, the way that they account for that, is by counting from the bass note up. So the bass note of that chord is an F, right? So we have F, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So by the time that I get to that G is 9 degrees up from that bass note. That's that. And it resolves down to 8. And that's why it's called a 9/8 suspension. So if you take that same rule and you apply it to the next example, here's my bass note. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 gives me that one, and then it resolves down to this one, and that's why that's called a 4/3 suspension. Do you need to actually do this when you're doing analysis? It depends on how thorough an analysis you want to do. Because really, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, when it's a really good thing to analyze pieces of music when you're learning, especially composition and performance practice, because you kind of want to understand what the composer's actually doing and get in their brain. Do you have to get to this degree? Well, it depends on what you're playing, who the composer is, and what time period it might be. This is really, I think that is super important especially when you're playing modern music, because a lot of the chords get really complicated, especially when you start adding, chords stacked on top of chords and stuff like that. You really want to know how it is that you fit in there. All right, Giuseppe, did you want to say something?
Hey, Robert.
Yeah.
So can you go back to the neighborhood
Yeah.
slides?
Yeah. Let me get out of this first. Just a second. All right. Yeah.
Okay, on the first measure, there is C-O-N-E. What's the mean that?
C.
Very top line.
O. On E. It's actually, I don't know what I'm not really sure what the on is, but it's actually telling you that this is a C chord. What they're saying up in front. Let me annotate this.
Hey, Robert.
Yeah.
I've seen this a few times. All they're saying is it's a C chord based on E. That's it.
I know.
Okay.
So chord analysis, when you're doing chord analysis, it's very common for us to use a Roman numeral analysis down at the bottom, and use either letters or jazz chords at the top, and we'll get to jazz chords in a minute, because jazz chords are a very practical way of actually looking and explaining the harmonics of a song. We're just not there yet. We need to go a little bit at a time. But in here, all it's telling you is that it's a C chord. It's a C chord with an E at the bottom.
Got it.
This
And
would
one
be
more-
represented in jazz. It would be represented something like that. You know, meaning there's a C chord, but the E would be placed at the bottom. But it doesn't. You know, right now it doesn't. It's you don't need to worry about that. Concentrate on what's happening down here.
Got it. One more question.
Yeah.
On that chord there, it's a E, C, G, basically. It's a different inversion than a C, no, E, G, C.
So if I understand, so you have an E, C, G.
Yeah, that will be the first inversion, right?
Uh-huh.
And the last one here, so what's it? They're different, but they're both first inversions.
Yeah, what's important is what note is at the bottom.
Got it.
In other
That's
words,
all.
the number, yeah, what the numbers will tell you is what note is really at the base, and the actual triad relative to that, which in this case is C, E, G.
Got it.
So
Thank you.
no matter what, you were talking about that. If it starts with this one at the bottom, it's first inversion. If it starts with this one at the bottom, it's second inversion.
All right. Thank you.
Okay? Cool. So, you know, this is something that I remember in college when they were teaching us, you know, analysis and all of that kind of stuff, naturally our focus was to learn this stuff because it was going to be on a test. In going back and forth whether we actually needed this for this class or not, I actually opted with, yeah, we really do need this. Because even though you're not going to be taking any tests on this, what we're going to want to do after all of this is actually to take a score and see how it is that we fit in it. And in order for us to actually find out that tonality, we need to actually have some basic rules around that. And this is what teaches us that. What we're missing here that you should be doing, hopefully to a degree at home, is to do an amount of ear training, and that involves singing intervals. Participating like the app that I recommended, like that cat ear type of thing, singing intervals, tuning with drones and things like that is developing your ear as you're doing this, so that you can kind of imagine what these chords actually sound like. I'll tell you the reason why in just a minute, but I don't want to go there yet because it'll derail the conversation. So we were at the suspenders, right? So suspensions, meaning that you're hanging on to a chord degree when the chord is actually, you know, resolving to something else. And we call the suspension depending on what the non-chordal degree is relative to the bass of that note. All right, so I wanted to look at, this piece of work, and let me see if I can show you. How do I want to do this? I want to show it and I want to play it. So you don't have to look at the YouTube, you just have to, okay, I know what we want to do. So I want to show you something that Bach wrote. There's this guy, his name was Johann Sebastian Bach, and he wrote a few things. So where am I? Paint. Oh, there we are. Okay. There is that. All right. So I want you to look at this, and we're going to look at this at the same time as we're actually listening to it. So can everybody see this? It looks like you can. All right. So here's a couple of things before we listen to this. This is this kind of writing, and you see it in churches a lot. This is most of us will know it as ACWE. And that stands for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And the way that I know that is because you can see the stems of each note facing different ways. So you have a staff in bass clef and you have a staff in treble clef, meaning that these are the high voices and these are the low voices. So in a choir, these are the men's voices or the lower voices, and these are the women's voices or the upper voices. And so the highest notes and in the highest tessitura or the highest range of voices is going to be written with the stems going up, and that will indicate that a soprano would sing that line. And the stems going down in the treble clef would mean that the alto would sing that line. And the stem going up in the bass clef, that means that the tenor would sing that line, and then the bass would sing that line. And so if you're a singer and you're following all of that business, then that's soprano, alto, tenor, bass, or where I was corrected was soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone. It doesn't. The B could be either one, because in this case you don't have to be a true bass to actually hit that note. But if it goes much lower than that, then you need to be a true bass, because a human baritone doesn't usually travel down there unless they're exceptional. All right, but it really depends on what voice range you're talking about. The bass notes always going to be down here. So if you're a guy that sings in my range, then I would be reading this bottom line. If you're a guy who has a relatively higher voice, then you would be reading that. If you have a woman with a relatively lower voice, then that would be your line. And if you have a high voice, then that would be that line. And that's what's called ACWE. And you see this a lot in this is how if you go to church, then your church hymnal, you'll see that it's set up like this. Okay. So they're basically individual lines that can be played together. So we can analyze them like that. All right. So while I'm doing that, let me give you. We're right on schedule here. So let me go ahead, and while you're looking at that, let me see if I can. Whoops. Where was I? Come here. Sorry. Did I say that I was having trouble with electronics today? Was that a question? Or was that a haha? All right. Let's see. I already had it in here. I knew I had it queued up. All right. All right, so we're going to listen to this piece of work. If it'll go. Really? Oh. Come on, man. All of a sudden I'm seeing Jimmy Kimmel's quarantine monologue. Oh, there we go. And YouTube's long-term contract. There we go. So we can kind of tell where we were, right? Kind of. Let me see, make sure to cancel that. Sorry, it's going to go into something else. There. So, was everybody able to follow that all the way through to the end? Cool. All right. So one of the things that I want to do is, let me see if I can upload. I'm going to upload the that image file just so you can have it, because I think it's good homework. If you want to attack this as homework, do it. If not, we'll recap with it. Next week. But I kind of want to get you started on this, so let's look at it. Yeah. Did I mention that I'm having problems with? Yeah. Aus meines Herzensgründe. I think what that means is I'm out of my ever-picking mind. Out of my mind. That's what it says. So if you know German, don't correct me. I know that. Yeah, that F natural. So let's look at that for just a minute. What the hell is it? I didn't close it. And I'll get you started kind of on it. There. Where are you? Okay. All right. So the first thing that we have to do on something like this is to actually determine the key. And so you'll see here that there are going to be a few clues here. Always kind of look where you start and look where you end. If you don't know anything else about the whole piece, then look at these ending places and look at what looks like home to you. Let's just kind of look at what happens at the very end. What's that note at the bottom? That's a G. What's that note here on the tenor? Is a B. It's a D. So I could spell that chord. Let me see if I can get yeah. So this chord down here can be spelled G, B, D. Is that last chord in root position? Yes, it is, because the G is at the bottom. So right now I'm actually kind of thinking that this piece might be in G major. Let's look for some other signs that kind of tell me that. Well, one of them would be the key signature. What key signature do I have? I have one sharp. If I'm looking at a major key, which one would have a sharp G major? So that takes that box. Then the other thing is that I want to kind of look at all of these stopping places and see what tone predominates. What's the most common stopping place, and what is it that most people would be able to call home base? And so if you look at what happens here, what's this chord right here? That's a G at the bottom. That's a B. That's a D. So I'm back to spelling that chord again, G, B, D. So you can see that chord is the same as that one. It's even spelled the same way. So I can pretty much make a case that we're really playing in something that is calling G home base. And my evidence to that is that this is where we're going. And not only that, this is where we're starting. So I know that wasn't very pretty. So let me just kind of clear all of that business, and then let's just get ourselves started here. So in the key of G, so the first thing that I would want to do is that I want to make sure that I don't forget all that work that I just did and kind of throw all of that to the wind. So I kind of want to put G like that and then colon. And that means I'm going to be looking at the analysis of this piece, assuming that G is my home base and that I'm in G major. And if that's the case, I've already said that this is a one chord in root position. All right, so let me give you just a couple of minutes to actually look at that next measure and see if you can kind of come up with some things. Really look at the notes that are at the bottom and see if we can actually spell out a chord that would make sense here. So the first thing that I would do is look at this chord down here. Look how tight that space is. Well, that looks like this would be. Let's spell this out. So this is G, this is B, this is E, and that's a G. That's really interesting because it doesn't look like it's a G, B, D chord anymore. It looks like if I'm going to stack them, if I'm going to stack this chord line, 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 it looks like it would be E, G, B. But it has a G at the bottom. It doesn't have. So let me tell you what my thinking is here. The way that I can look at that chord is this way. All right, so let's look at that note. That's a G, that's a B, that's an E, and that's a G, right? So I have all of those in there. But I'm starting with a G at the bottom. That means that it would be first inversion. So what's an E? What's the E degree in the G scale? Well, I have to count G, 2, 6. It's a sixth in here. So I could actually say that this is a sixth in first inversion. Okay? So I'm just making the case for that. If somebody wants to make the case for something else, then let's look at it. All right, and then let's move to the second one. What's the note on the bass? The note on the bass is an E. This note is a C, and that's a D. I have 3 notes to do this with, and I'm not finding a way that they stack really, really, really well. But look at what's happening between that note and that note and that note. Let's look at that B and see if I can fit that note in the chord, and then I can call this an upper neighbor note. So this is an E, that's a B, and that's a D. I can, in fact, actually I can stack that because an E, a B, and a D, let me see, what did I do? I had it in my head, I didn't. Or E.
Yeah, it's a 7 chord miss on the third.
Yes, yeah, but it's missing the third, and that's what it's doing. So if I have the G, E, I don't know why I'm brain dead right now. Spell out the 7 chord because I had it just a minute ago.
So it'd be E, G, B, D, and the D is the 7th, and the G is missing. Common.
Yeah, right. So I'm with Warren here. I saw it at first and then I skipped it. So the notes that we're kind of trying to make an argument for here is that it would be E, B, D, which you have here, here, and here. The thing though is that this is somewhat of a bad example because we didn't do 7 chords yet, but.
You just commented, and they're correct. In the soprano is the G, it's a half note, so it carries through, so it's not.
Yeah. So I'm cool with calling it that. It's just that this group hasn't, or a lot of people in here haven't seen chords with a 7th in it. So this is kind of like it's probably a little advanced for this group. I thought that we were just going to have triads in this because I give it a tertiary look, but that's what it is. So. Because of time, I'm gonna hold it here. You can look at this piece of music, try as much as you can to do this kind of analysis, and I will actually start this next week. We'll actually start looking at 7 chords, and a bunch of this will make sense. I'm gonna give you a heads up on that just so you don't think that. Well, you're still gonna think that I'm crazy, but that's all right. So what folks are talking about seven chords is you not only do we actually have triads, but we also have what are called tetrads. And they still follow the same idea of line, 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 but now they're going line. And so what happens now is that we cover all the possibilities within an octave if we do that. So look at what happens here if I go space, 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 space. So it's called a tetrad because you have 4 of these guys instead of 3. But the same rules actually apply to these in that this would be a tetrad in root position, but this would be a tetrad in first inversion, meaning that it would actually be, this is a D, right? So if I spell out the chord D, F, A, C, in here I would have an F, A, C, D, but it's the same notes. So here, this is the same chord, but it would be in the first inversion. So we'll do this. This gets a little bit more complicated with the sorry, I can't see it. I know that there was something in the chat and I can't see it. Let me stop sharing. That'll do it. So once you actually start adding the 7 chords, then things start getting a little bit wild because there in some of them, you can actually see bits and pieces of other chords and how they actually fit together. But start easy. Start with triads and try to see if you can get that Bach piece, or really if you belong to a church and you actually have the church hymnal or access to a church hymnal. Those are great to analyze because many of them are just triads. And so try to just kind of take one of those and go, what's my key signature? In other words, what's my home base? Does this likely to be in major or minor? And then start actually going, can I actually spell all of these things, space, 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 line, 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 and see how it is that you can actually get them in a tight little bundle. And that's what chord analysis is. It's just try to bundle things together and see how the pieces of the puzzle kind of come together. Okay?
Robert.
Sir.
How I think as a conductor, how these things, it's awesome that the players are learning this stuff, because especially with this subject matter, the suspensions, the neighbor tones, neighbor groups, and all that stuff, is when you see that stuff, not all the time, but almost all the time, that's when the player probably needs to bring out that little segment just a little bit, because that's something that's different than the chord. It needs to be heard a little bit. So if a player sees this and brings it out, well, then you're able to be just a little bit more musical in your interpretation of what's being played, making the job of the conductor easier. Because if we play through something and the player sees, hey, this is an anticipation, I need to bring that out just a little bit and then back off, then the conductor doesn't have to stop and say, hey, bring that out some.
So so what you're suggesting, Thomas, if I hear you correctly,
here comes the sarcasm.
If you don't understand something, play it louder.
No, I'm sorry.
Right?
Yep.
That's a good idea. I agree with Thomas, because really understanding these things, especially the notes in between chords and the things that are actually going. If you have a suspension or if you have an anticipation and things like that, those are things that the composer actually intended to be heard. Another thing that's really important about this chord analysis thing is for us to go back to our very first discussions on natural temperament, because we still as wind players, we still have to understand that equal temperament is a disservice to us, because we have to fight with our instruments to actually make up for it. I'm saying that because under natural temperament, the third of the chords are usually, your ear wants to hear them lower than equal temperament puts them. So in natural temperament, a C, E, G chord, the E, that E would be lower than the piano. Therefore, therefore, in equal temperament, when I play on a piano, when I play a major triad on that piano, that major triad is out of tune. Under what natural temperament would be, and that's the compromise. But when you're a wind player, when you're a singer, you don't have to compromise that. If you know that you're singing the third of the chord, you can play it just a little bit down a little bit, and it locks right in tune, and that chord just kind of comes out like a beautiful major chord. This is something that's music trivia for you. Chord tuners and some other tuners. The electric tuners, have you ever wondered why they have the two little notches? So you have the tuning note perfectly in there, and then you have two little notches right next to them. Those are to adjust for the thirds. And so if you're on one particular third and you're actually tuning, and you want to actually lock in that tuning, those are there for your convenience. They're not telling you, well, if you're in this range, you're okay. That's not what it's telling you. So there are chord tendencies that we have to adjust with an understanding of where it is that we fit in that chord, and that's really important, because this happens all the time. With players, you play a chord and you go, second clarinet, that note's out of tune, and you're the second clarinet player, you're looking at the tuner, it's perfectly in tune with the tuner. But it doesn't sound like it's in tune. So it could very well be that the other guys are playing perfectly in tune, and that you are playing perfectly in tune, out of tune. And so this is part of our job is to kind of figure out why don't I fit in this particular chord, and more than likely is you just not understanding it. You go, or better yet, you just kind of going, oh, these bozos are always sharp, and then you adjust and it's in tune and stuff like that. But there's a lot of times there's a better explanation. All right. So yes, it is an indictment on trombones, because trombones should be perfect all the time, and they're not. So there, we can blame all our woes on trombones. All right, guys, I am done. So if you guys want to stick around and jabber a bit, that's fine. But I am done. So